Hey everyone, Georgie here with Ukraine Matters. I want to start today's video by taking a very specific gamble. I will gamble and say that Bakhmut will not be taken by Russians. Period. I know this is mostly my feeling, how I see things, like my maybe skewed, my bias analysis depending on my sources. But the more information I uncover about the situation around Bakhmut, the more information I uncover about how the fighting is happening and so on, the more I am led to believe that the window of opportunity for Wagnerites to take over Bakhmut is either completely closed already, which I do believe so, or is extremely narrow still. But I do not believe that Bakhmut will be encircled, and I do not believe that we will see Bakhmut being taken by the Russians. So with that said, let's get over the map, and we're going to talk about Bakhmut and everything else as we go forward. And I'm going to explain why I think that the encirclement of Bakhmut is not going to happen. Northern front line. So here we have mostly local battles happening pretty much somewhere all along the front lines in the north. And in the south around Kremina, I told you last time that Russians were getting some of the fresh troops here to kind of counterweight the activity around Bakhmut to do in this area. And we've heard that Russian troops are attacking here, especially around Kremina forests. I've heard that they're trying to break through the forest lines. But it all so far is mostly fighting in this gray zone that we've known so far. So just so you remember that the fighting is happening there, but nothing is happening so far. Bilohorivka recently just again have been claimed by the Russians that Bilohorivka has been taken. It has been taken by Russians by now, I believe, 20 or 30 times. It is not true. Bilohorivka is not taken, so whatever you hear is not there. Now we get to the actual hot zone. And the hot zone starts from this northern part here. And Russians here are trying to attack towards Rozdolivka, and they have seen little to no successes. It's quite an extreme fighting here, where a lot of the already used meat wave attacks are happening, but they're achieving little to nothing. Russians have been having around Bakhmut a little bit of success in direction of kind of towards the west. But again, in the recent developments, we've heard that they've almost reached Minkivka. But since then, they've been stopped and they've been actually pushed back a little bit. So it's a tactical fighting right now. But overall, the situation is there more favoring the Russian side. And then we get into the actual kind of tough Bakhmut situation. Here we're going to go zone by zone. So at the northern zone here, Ukrainian sources are reporting that fighting is intense around the north of Bogdanivka and around the north of Kromove. So what you need to take away from this is that this is exactly where the same place where fighting have been taking place about a week ago. Like the advancement of Russians maybe is like 10 meters, like 15 meters or so. But Ukrainians are also have been known to counterattack in these directions. So we can say that pretty much the Russian offensive on these directions, despite the fighting being extremely intense, it has been stalled. Then we go into the northern part. Here again, a similar picture. Russians have entered the Azov complex grounds, and they've gained some foothold on it, as you can see by Deep State. However, this happened already like good half a week ago, or if not a whole week ago. Since then, we know that Ukrainians have been counterattacking in that city, and they've been counterattacking back. And this is going to be true for the next couple of points that I'm going to discuss at all, is that the fighting inside of city, like entering Azov, this is where pretty much we're stopping to fight on the outskirts of Bakhmut, and we start fighting inside of a city line of Bakhmut here. And this is complete nightmare. A lot of analysts are saying that pretty much there is no army in the world that knows how to efficiently fight inside of a city line. It's a nightmare. Like fighting inside city line is a complete grind and nightmare. And as much as we saw that Russians were advancing throughout towards the outskirts of the city, yes, slowly here, 100 meters, 100 meters, 100 meters. Now we see they entered the city line, and it's an instant, complete, slow grind hold what they got. They get into positional fightings, fighting for every street, for every corner, for every house. Russians here are in a nightmare scenario, and whatever they're saying about, oh yeah, wow, they're getting into the city, it's not even close. If we're not considering what is happening around Bakhmut, then getting through the center of Bakhmut here is so far looks like an impossible task for the Russians, and I'll explain why as well. In the central part, we've seen that Russians are trying to essentially cross the river. We have been seeing reports that there was a crossing here, that there was a crossing up there was a crossing also in the central part, and so on. And it's a local crossings. We also heard the same way that Ukrainians have also been crossing sometimes the river. So overall, we can say that the river is still this divisive part in between the parts of the city, and Russians are struggling to get a foothold on the left bank of the river here. And this means that the main part, the center of the city where the tall buildings are, because remember, this is where the tall buildings are, this is where the actual city line is, whereas this is mostly like, like private houses and sort of like an outskirts. On the south side, it's the same thing. We see that Russians have been trying to advance towards the northern part, and they really have been trying to attack and so on. Some people say, oh, they're just trying to encircle this part, but this is a gray zone here, and if there is some Ukrainian units here, they're quite mobile. There is no major like dense high-rise buildings. Well, there are some, but it's a still area that cannot be just captured easily by the Russians, and Ukrainians are fighting heavily in this area, and we're hearing constantly that there is counterattack happening here and there is counterattack happening here and there, and just recently we've heard that Russians before, they were actually here trying to attack this crossing of the road, and since then Ukrainians have been pushing the Russians back from the road just recently. So it's a back and forth in the city. So, and around the Ivanivsky direction on the south, this is where Ukrainians have the best momentum. They've pushed the Russians quite far, and we actually already hear some kind of discussions about the fact that Ukrainians are looking to get back. If you remember, like a couple of months ago when we were talking about Klishivka, this is the area where there is a lot of the fortified positions here on the top of the hill. So potentially Ukrainians at some point looking to recapture that hill to basically secure the southern side and neglect Russian advances and any kind of ability. But what does this leave us with? And this is where I get to why I think the Bakhmut is not going to get captured. Is that so far the encirclement part from the north has been stalled. The encirclement part from the south has been pretty much turned around. So right now, Russians are putting more forces into trying to maybe push, through the city itself. But through the city itself, I said, well, it's going to take forever. It's going to take too long. And then around the sides, if it's stalled here and if there is a counter push here, then there is no encirclement. Then the supplies are still coming to the city. So whatever Russians are still trying to achieve, they're not getting it. Ukrainians have also, like in the recent day, there's been circulation of videos where additional reinforcements have been moving towards Bakhmut area. And those are fresh forces. So we are probably seeing a potential counterpunch. I told you before that there was speculation about Ukrainian forces gathering in some of these areas here and some of the areas towards the west also. And now we've seen videos of these forces being gathered. So this leads me to believe that indeed, as soon as there is like condition for any kind of attack, then at least some kind of a potential counter, some kind of efficient counter push will be happening on the Bakhmut direction as well. So if my analysis is worth anything, I believe that Wagnerites, they lost it. They lost the battle for Bakhmut. Ukraine didn't give Bakhmut away. The defenders of Bakhmut held. And now, basically, we're just waiting a couple of weeks for ground to solidify just a little bit. So all of these forces that we've seen on the videos will counterpunch the Russians, and we see Bakhmut situation being relieved of the tension it is under now, because there is no chance that Russians will be able to grind through the city proper in the coming couple of weeks. And remember, if we're looking for a big counteroffensive of Ukrainians, then we're looking for it to be started around May, right? Maybe late April, May. So in that sense, Russia has maybe a month's time in total, maybe a month and a couple of weeks. Another place I must tell you about is Avdiivka. Not because, like, as some of the Western journalists again reporting, which made me super facepalm, because they're saying, oh no, another new encirclement is potentially coming. Whatever Ukraine is gonna do, because they saw, oh, okay, there is like a there is some kind of map movement in this area. There is some kind of map movement in this area. Well, I can draw maps on the map. Therefore, Avdiivka encircled. That's it. That's it. Ukrainians have nothing to do, which is a complete nonsense. Obviously, argument. We've seen this many times by this point. So Avdiivka is nowhere near encirclement. It's nowhere near being a difficult position. But what is definitely happening in Avdiivka is that basically Russians are repeating Vuhledar situation. Remember battles for Vuhledar, where there was like vehicles and equipment coming, getting onto the mines, exploding, and then the next waves coming in, and so on. The same is happening in Avdiivka, except here they're not doing it from just one direction, so it's like as obvious as it was on Vuhledar. But here they're trying to go into different directions. Here we know that they're trying to go here, trying to go here, trying to go here, trying to go here, and so on. And they're trying to do this. They've got some ground on Krasnohorivka and Vesele area, yes. But after that, it's now a slaughter that is happening there. They're losing a lot of troops. So just something that you need to be aware of is that what was happening in Vuhledar some time ago is now happening around Avdiivka, which is kind of crazy. That's the situation on the front lines. I should speak about this. But Ukrainians have been preparing for counteroffensive. That one, you know. And in the recent week or so, we've heard multiple times that Ukrainians are doing these probing attacks where they're trying to essentially see where is Russian forces are active, how strong the defenses are. And we already know the results of some of these activities. The results are that Ukrainians, without even overwhelming support of the advancing forces, have been able to reach Russian forward positions with relatively small number of troops and relatively light support of armor, which is extremely good. That means that Russian forward positions might not be as secure as it is. But these are like, because you will hear about these Ukrainian attacks on the south side in the coming weeks. And I just want you to be aware why is it happening is because there is preparation for Ukrainian assault. Some people already came to the conclusion that, oh, does that mean that Ukrainian attack is already happening? And the answer is no. It is right now just probing tactics for it. And that's it. So let's go to the second part of the video and talk about the important stuff. So before we continue, I'm pretty sure you know what you need to do right now. You need to slap that like button, hit the subscribe button, and maybe share this video on your social networks. I would really appreciate it so the true news about Ukraine will get around. And also you should join the Discord that we're setting up slowly but surely to talk with me later on when we're going to have the streams and see this channel grow forward. Obvious topic that I want to talk to you about today is obviously the charges that were put forward by the International Criminal Court to Putin. Because while the topic has been discussed and over-discussed already everywhere pretty much, and I'm late for the party, I really believe that a couple of implications have not been discussed in deep enough sense. And what I want to say is, what does this bring to the table? Because As rightfully a lot of people have said, the fact that the order for arrest of Putin issued does not really mean that Putin will be brought to justice tomorrow. It's most probably going to be ignored by Russia. Putin will never going to travel to a country where there is a chance for it. But we need to understand that it brings very severe implications with it. And first thing that it brings is that it brings a signal to the Western leaders, to the Western society as well. And it is the signal that we have treated Putin for way too long as someone that is untouchable, as a person that is a force of nature. That it was something that gave, for example, some kind of a food, it gave some kind of power to all of the realists of this world that were saying that Russia is a big power and it's going to be a big power forever, and whoever is in charge of Russia is going to stay there with this power, so we need to take into consideration what they want. With this criminal charge, it is not, we were basically bringing Putin down to the human level. Like, he stops being any kind of a demigod that's not going anywhere, that we always need to find an off-ramp for, and bring him to the justice. We come back from the time of kings, and essentially we're quickly evolving back into our 21st century, where laws are what defines whether a person is good or not. Because what is most important about this order is that the whole discussion about Putin being brought to justice is not about anything that is happening in the war, particularly, like attacking in the war, or it is like because of the assault on Ukraine, because it's like a geopolitical discussion. So we go away from the geopolitical discussions around Putin, and we see that the charge levied against Putin is a criminal charge. It's a charge against a crime that's already has been committed. And there is no leaving that, because even if the war is over, even if Putin is saying, okay, we finished the war today, I'm taking away my troops and whatnot, and then we can say, okay, discussions about, if Putin attack Ukraine, and then what's the reparations and whatnot, this is all understandable. However, in this situation, it's a personal criminal charge. Putin has been charged by essentially saying that he's running a criminal activity of kidnapping kids, and essentially human trafficking. And that is completely different, because even if the war is over, the crime has still already been committed, and Putin would still need to answer by himself in front of the court. And that is important, because we, as I said, bring the human part to this. So for us in the West, that means that there is pretty much no negotiations going forward. Like, how can you negotiate with a human trafficker, with a person that needs to go to court right now? It's a very, very specific and important point for the Western societies. Second, it's a very strong signal to China, because China really wanted to come in as this peace broker, because recently China brokered peace between the Iran and United Arab Emirates, and they had a lot of clout about themselves as the peace brokers. So I'm really believing that Xi Jinping was really thinking about bringing some kind of a potential negotiated solutions in between Russia and Ukraine, at least start some kind of dialogue, probably Minsk III or something. However, now, to negotiate with who? With Putin? Well, he is under criminal charges, under criminal offenses. He is now supposed to answer in front of the criminal court. This is a hard pill to swallow, because even if it's just a symbolic, we already see that this order have been making more waves than anything else so far. No sanctions, no kind of genocide accusations never stick to Putin. This thing did. Right away it did. And it was hilarious. because even in Russia, like the Russian propaganda just became lucid about the fact that they've levied this criminal charge against Putin, and they said, let's negotiate some kind of peace solution. Again, they don't want to negotiate, but let's talk about this. It's like, let's negotiate some kind of peace solution, but the prerequisite is that all of the criminal charges must be dropped against Putin. I'm sorry, but the criminal charge levied against Putin is not part of the war crime. It's not part of this crime of aggressive war. It's a separate criminal charge, completely devolved from the war, because essentially the crime that he's being accused as he's running the criminal organization that kidnaps children, which is different from attacking Ukraine altogether. And then finally, the strongest signal that this brings to the table is a signal to Russian elites, because Russian elites always thought that Putin is in agreement with world leaders. You know, that if the position of Russia is strong enough, then they can negotiate. But with this, what they basically are seeing right now, that even if Putin is not secure, then they are not secure. So even if they thought that maybe they will have some kind of chance of getting clean after this war is over, it doesn't look like it. Because if even before the war is over, right now the Western leaders are, well, not Western leaders, but the justice system is strong enough to levy charges even against Putin, even before he's removed as a head of state, that is a massive signal for a lot of these. And I can tell you right away from what I'm hearing within the Russian oligarchic, bureaucratic government, they are a little bit scared, to put it mildly. They are really worried about their future and what the future will be for them, and if they will be essentially on the same bench as Putin. And I'm pretty sure a lot of them will go work with CIA a lot more willingly going forward. With this said, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you taking your time. I'll see you guys next time. Love you all. Slava Ukraini!